Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus, continuing our Mono Green Devotion versus Series gauntlet here. We're going to be doing Mono Green Devotion and Pioneer versus Mono Black Aggro. This is circa November 2019, so if the lists are updated or decks are played again, you'll have some idea of when these decks lists were. This was two decks that placed in the top 8 of a PTQ on Magic Online on the 15th of November this month. The first one is a Mono Green Devotion list by Phi Lan. This list is very similar to Todd Anderson's work for the first couple weekends. Basically, the revamped Mono Green Devotion after the bannings of Oath of Nissa, Leyline of Abundance, and the Veil of Summer. So, Devotion deck obviously tries to power out absurd amounts of mana using Nykthos and Castle Garenbrig, along with 8 copies of 1 mana spells in Land War Elves and Elvish Mystic, and then also using cards like Once Upon a Time to add consistency to the deck. Would not be surprised if Once Upon a Time is actually banned tomorrow. Scavenging Ooze and Voracious Hider kind of give you utility. Other than that, the deck is basically designed around trying to churn through your deck and get as much mana as possible. Burning Tree Emissary gives you 2 pips of Devotion for Nykthos, as well as being a pseudo-free spell. Jade Light Ranger with the Explorer ability allows you to find land drops, cycle through your deck a little bit faster to find your key drops of Vivian Arcbow Ranger and Nissa, who shakes the world. Vivian here, myriad of plus abilities, powers up your team, allows your creatures to deal damage to creatures or planeswalkers, and allows you to search outside your the game to find a creature to end the game, usually Ulamog. Also, some lists like this one are also running Hornet Queen. Depends on what situation you're in. Obviously, Hornet Queen's pretty good against other aggro decks, and then Ulamog allows you to end the game much more effectively against control decks. And then Nissa is a threat that also helps to boost your mana production, so this is a card that can add a tremendous amount of pressure to the board, as well as devotion and slices and dices and ends the game. And then the -8 obviously can end the game pretty quickly as well. So, and then Voracious Hydra is a split card, is able a removal spell in the early turns, and can also be a very, very large threat your opponent has to answer. Walking Ballista also allows you to control the board and can also be a fireball in the mid to late game. This deck is all about mana, playing to the board, so there are various ways to attack it. We've already played a versus Simic Nexus and showed a couple different matches with that. As far as the sideboard, this one's a little bit differently than the last one. Lifecaster's Bestiary is here for the control decks, along with copies of Shaper's Sanctuary for any decks with a bunch of removal. Reclamation Sages are pretty much here for the Nexus decks and any type of Hardened Scales decks, etc. For Nylea's Disciples, those are pretty much for the aggro decks like they'll be playing against today, and then Hornet Queen is your other tutor target for Vivian Arcbow. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, as we are now aiming to be a more informative based channel, playing a bunch of versus matchups for various decks in various formats, primarily Pioneer and Modern, alternating between Pioneer and Modern. Currently working on the key matchups in the format for Mono Green Devotion. With that, let's get into the deck tech for Mono Black Aggro. We are back for the deck tech for Mono Black Aggro. This particular list is by Dark Jund or Dark Jund SA. So this is an aggressive deck that is in the early portion of the format that can leverage things like Castle, Locthwain, and Mutavault, in addition to Urborg. Other than that, it's primarily a swamp-based deck. You'll find no splashes or anything in this list. You have a bunch of 1-drops, Bloodsoaked Champion, Knight of the Abylegian, Night Market Lookout, and a copy of Gutterbones. So 13 1-drops. The reason a card as terrible as Night Market Lookout is in the deck is primarily the card Smuggler's Copter. This is a card that allows you to discard for value things like Bloodsoaked Champion, Scrap Heap Scrounger, get them back later instead of discarding your lands. Your lands are actually quite valuable, as there's a lot of mana leverage plays, like things like getting back your Bloodsoaked Champion, pumping your Knight of the Ebon Legion, also getting things like Scrap Heap Scrounger back, casting and getting back your Murderous Rider / Swift End, And then Rankle, obviously being at the top end of the deck here, gives you a lot of tremendous play as well as haste. Rankle and Smuggler's Copter allows you to run board stalls, and beyond that you're using things like Fatal Push and Thoughtseize, the two most efficient disruption spells in the format. Thoughtseize allows you to take a key card out of your opponent's hand, Fatal Push allows you to kill most of the early creatures that your opponents could present to block your early aggression, and then Murderous Rider kind of gives you the split card of Hero's Downfall plus a 2/3 with lifelink. As far as the sideboard, this figure gives you some more early removal, along with Noxious Grasp, which is primarily because the format is so green-based right now. This could be another removal spell at some other point in time. Things like Grasp of Darkness and such could certainly be played, but Noxious Grasp gets the call here because you need to be able to kill things like Oko or Golden Goose and such. Duress and Kitesail Freebooter when you need to disrupt control decks, Rune Rider when you need a little bit more card draw, and then Kalitas when you're trying to play a more controlling role against some of these other deck archetypes. With that, let's get into the matches and see how Mono Green Devotion fares against what is considered one of the best aggro decks early in the format. We are back for game number 1, match number 1 in Mono Green Devotion versus Mono Black Aggro here in Pioneer. We're on the play here as the Devotion deck, which is nice. Sand shapes up quite nicely. We've got a couple 1-drop accelerators, along with Jadelight Ranger and a couple payoffs in Voracious Hydra and Walking Ballista. So outside of having Nykthos or a crazy busted Burning Tree start, this hand's pretty good for what the deck's trying to do. Opponent leads on Knight of the Ebon Legion. Not their most threatening 1-drop, but a card that definitely grows out of hand rather quickly. Jadelight gives us a forest, shows us Nissa on top, which we choose to leave on top. Hopefully we'll draw a land. What does Smuggler's Copter here? So there's a couple different lines we could take here. I could try to take play Elvish Mystic and maybe a Walking Ballista here to guarantee we hit Nissa next turn. I choose to take the bigger gamble of using one of our payoffs here. So we could use Ballista, just shoot Knight, or we could use Voracious Hydra to kill it outright by just making a 2/3 and fighting the Knight. I choose to fight the Knight instead. I'll use it to crew the Smuggler's Copter, hoping to deter an attack. So we could leave back the Jadelight Ranger here, but without a Nykthos specifically, I don't think there's a reason to leave the Devotion in play. This could be incorrect here, but our opponent chooses not to block anyway. Opponent uses Night Mark Lookout to crew the vehicle, start threatening. This deck gets a lot of value by discarding things like Scrap Heap Scrounger and Bloodstone Champion, bringing them back from the graveyard for cheaper. So, interesting. We draw another Elvish Mystic, just deploy a couple of Dorkos, bring to attacks here, play out a Walking Ballista here, use it to trade. Maybe not the best use of our resources, but we do want to kill their creatures as much as possible. They already had the Knight in the graveyard if they wanted to get the Scrap Heap Scrounger back, which it looks like they missed the opportunity to do so. Bloodstock Champion crewing Copter, discarding another Scrounger, push the Voracious Hydra, get the Scrounger back so they don't forget this time. We just go straight to Nissa. Nissa allows us to pressure them quite a bit since Scrounger can't block. And then they deploy another Scrounger. They go to attacks here. So it looks like they're willingly just trying to race now, which I don't know if that's going to be the best for them, but just since I think they're dead on board regardless. And then Burning Tree, Vivian, and make us a bunch of 4/4s, and that's just too much power on the battlefield. And we get there. So, a little bit of a curious misplay on our opponent's part with the Scrap Heap Scrounger. And it's possible they were supposed to trade with a Copter earlier with the Jadelight Ranger, but I do think this draw ends up working out quite nicely for us. They were a little bit low on disruption, and so they didn't have their best start right out of the gate, but just shows you how dangerous this deck can be, that even though they started behind the 8-ball a little bit, that they were still almost able to race us down with a little bit of pressure here. So anyways, on to sideboarding and game number 2. So when I'm playing a deck, and I'm not familiar necessarily with the matchup, and we're doing a little bit of testing like this, sometimes I'll try some different configurations. This time I decided to board out a Scavenging Ooze, a Jade Light Ranger, a Vivian, and a Nissa for 4 copies of Nylea's Disciple. You could, if you know your opponent's going on a controlling plan, bring in something like Shaper Sanctuary or Lifecaster's Bestiary, but the problem with the mono black aggro deck is when they go on the controlling plan, they are often able to pressure their life total. This hand is interesting. Double Once Upon a Time, Nylea's Disciple. I think this hand's a keep. I guess I decided it wasn't. I think keeping that hand might have been correct, but relying on Once Upon a Time to hit something. This hand's also a lot of air, so I decided it was a mulligan. I think keeping that first hand would probably have ended up being correct. This hand obviously very good for a 5-card hand. We end up keeping it. I think the putbacks end up being Ballista and Mystic. Yep, seems like that. And then opponent uses Bloodsoaked Champion to get on the board. We draw another Burning Tree, which is nice. Hit a Forest, which obviously we need in case the Mystic dies. Opponent uses Disfigure, starts pressuring us. But notably, they miss a land drop. However, if we untap with these Burning Trees, we're going to have a lot of mana on our hands. Our opponent has another Disfigure. So we just use Jade Light to try to hit some land drops. We hit a Nykthos and leave a copy of Vivian on top. Opponent once again, a little bit heavy on the 1-drops, but they do not have the ability to really leverage it with being stuck on 1 land. Vivian Arcboat, I mean, you can certainly understand their keep with a couple Disfigures and a Bloodsoaked Champion. Enough to slow us down. They probably had a good enough hand that if they hit a second land drop, they'd be in pretty good shape. Use Vivian here, pump up the team, start pressuring their life total. Opponent uses Fatal Push on the Burning Tree, starts pressuring the Vivian. So use Vivian to pump the team. Hold back for a turn, which may or may not have been correct, as our opponent is able to kill the Vivian. We draw Nylea's Disciple, which swings the life total in our life a little bit more. Opponent really doesn't have any great blocks, but they chump block to stay a lot. They must have something in their hand that they're playing towards. Smuggler's Copter, Bloodsoaked Champion. Just continue to play the dorks out, go swinging. Opponent trades off. Discards a Kalitas, so they have another Kalitas in their hand? Is that what they're playing towards here? Opponent plays Murderous Rider, probably to stay alive here. Continue pressuring us, but we are ahead in the race, so they have to chump block here. So again, we have a huge amount of mana, but no payoff. There's the Kalitas. Once again, continues to pressure us. Burning Tree. Really no good attacks with 3/3s into a 3/4. So now the game kind of looks like it might stonewall here, and they do have the Castle Lockdwain with a Kalitas in play to potentially gain some life. However, we managed to draw Voracious Hydra at the right time. Make an absurdly large Voracious Hydra. Hope our opponent doesn't have a Fatal Push or something here to interact. They activate Castle Lockdwain in response, and they get some life here, but it's not going to be enough to keep them alive, as these Bloodsoaked Champions can't block. So, once again, we did get a little bit lucky to win this one. Game 1, we had a really good draw on the play. Game 2, our opponent stumbled on 1 land for a while, and even so, almost got back into the game just by the absurd amount of removal and value. So I'm going to see why they kept this hand. Smuggler's Copter. Looks like their hand was a bunch of removal, Smuggler's Copter, and a Bloodsoaked Champion. 1 lander, so if they would have ever hit that second land in a timely fashion, I think they would have been able to probably control this game as they did control our early plays. It's possible that that 7-card hand was not a mulligan. Double Once Upon a Time might have gotten us to what we were looking for, but I tend to mulligan a little bit aggressively with the London Mulligan rule, plus the ability to have absurdly busted draws. I think we saw in our testing versus Green Devotion that the the Simic Nexus deck had a 4-card hand that ended up winning a game. So sometimes it does pay off to be a little bit aggressive, especially when you have cards like Once Upon a Time to kind of hold your deck together. So, once again, that first hand could have been a keep, but mulliganing did pay off here, and our opponent did stumble a little bit, so we were able to take advantage of that. Anyways, on to match number 2. We are on the play for game number 1 of match number 2. This hand, kind of bonkers if we had a 1-drop or another land. As is, it's a mulligan. This hand kind of has the opposite problem. No accelerators. I think this hand's defensible as a keep, but we end up mulliganing it anyway. 2-drop and a 3-drop might be good enough. This hand has a lot going for it, but could get picked apart fairly easily, especially on a mull of 5. So I think we keep this hand and put back, what, a Hydron and Nykthos? Yep. To go turn 1. It has the Fatal Push. Play the Burning Tree. Plays a Smuggler's Copter. To start pressuring our opponent, playing a Jade Light. Have to put a Vivian in the graveyard. They keep another keep the other Jade Light on top. The Thoughtseize, take the Voracious Hydra. Plays a Knight of the Ebon Legion, which means they can crew the Copter here, which kind of stonewalls our aggression potentially. I think I choose to serve in with the Jade Light. They choose to block here, because it looks like they're trying to play for a longer game. Discarding a Bloodsuck Champion, get a little bit of extra value. Use Murderous Rider. No good attacks for them, just use the Walking Ballista here. Opponent goes to attacks. Once again, we could have potentially used Walking Ballista to peg this Knight of the Ebon Legion down. We draw an Elvish Mystic, which might not have been correct to actually play that there. Probably would have been correct to just pump the Ballista. Opponent's got the Swift End here. Once again, we could gun down the Bloodsuck Champion, but it doesn't really accomplish much. And they could pump the Knight of the Ebon Legion, so this is what I mean, though, about the mono black deck can turn the corner quite quickly. And even with all these lands, they're just kind of they have the leverage of the Castle Locthwain. You know, they're pressuring our life total on multiple bodies here, and we really need something like a Voracious Hydra or another Walking Ballista maybe to potentially stymie this board. And with that, them drawing 2 turns potentially with Castle Locthwain. This is why this mono black aggro deck can be so powerful. So, anyways, on to seeing how we sideboard this time around, and game number 2. Once again, do things a little bit differently. It did feel like we had quite a bit of air in the deck that time, so I'm cutting a little bit of the filtering and explosiveness, because they're likely to be able to pick that apart. So we're cutting a couple Jade Light Rangers, a Burning Tree Emissary, and a Nykthos. Brought in the 4 copies of Nylea's Disciple. It's possible we're supposed to be trying to bring in Hornet Queen rather than trying to tutor it up with Vivian, but I think having 4 virtual copies of it is a little bit better than trying to just spike the one of in the main deck. So Hornet Queen definitely would be very good in this matchup, but I'm not sure if we're supposed to leave it in the sideboard for the 4 Vivians or not. This hand, very good hand, especially if we find some land drops. Once Upon a Time helps us get there. This is a very good hand, so definitely keeping. Once again, lead on Once Upon a Time before you cast your elf. Take the forest because we need to land. Everything else is just kind of gravy at this point. Opponent goes Knight of the Ebon Legion, so no kill spell for a 1-drop. Lead off on Ranger here. Put that in the graveyard because we're just trying to hit land drops at this point. Opponent goes with Scrounger. We get to drop Vivian here on curve, which is nice. Pump up the jam. It's possible we're supposed to be attacking, but with the pump spell here, our opponent could have just killed, or if we would have attacked, our opponent could have just pumped the knight and dealt 6 to Vivian. Instead, they choose to swift end our Jade Light Ranger and presumably go after Vivian. Nope, they go after our light total here. So we're just trying to race. Doesn't feel quite correct here, but we just play Nissa because Nissa's a very broken card. And with the Nykthos, we get an extra mana, so we can do that. Pump up the team. So again, it's possible I'm not supposed to be attacking with the elf here, but it does feel like not quite a big deal. Opponent has a Noxious Grasp for our Nissa. Obviously, Vivian is a very powerful card, though. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to activate. 5, 6. I guess we're 1 mana short from dealing with. We're going to go get the Hornet Queen. Let's play a Ballista for 2. One thing we did miss is the opportunity to. I guess I didn't miss the opportunity. With them killing Nissa, I didn't have the opportunity to use Once Upon a Time last turn, so again, our opponent here curiously could have used Scrounger to crew Smuggler's Copter and maybe trade it off with the Elvish Mystic here. So a few curious plays by our opponent in this time around, but I don't think in the end it's going to end up mattering. I think we're far enough ahead this game that opponent kills the Vivian, goes ahead and uses another Murderous Rider to do the thing. Without a blocker, they're just dead to the Elvish Mystic. So got there, even despite losing some resources along the way and maybe missing one chance to cash in Once Upon a Time, but definitely showing how the attrition of mono black, especially if they get off on an aggressive start, can be problematic. And we'll be back here for game number 3 and match number 2. This time around, we kept sideboarding the same, cut a couple Jade Lights and a Burning Tree, along with a Nykthos. Once again, this might not be the correct alignment, as I'm not quite sure what is the number of payoffs versus protection we're supposed to leave in the deck. This hand's pretty decent. Elvish Mystic into Jade Light Ranger. Obviously a little less reliable on the draw. Opponent with a Bloodsoaked Champion. So we have our best 1-drop. So we could potentially curve out 1 into 3 into 4 into 5, but our opponent has the Fatal Push. Starts getting pressure. They have the Knight here. So play out the Scavenging Ooze, because this is a card that can certainly take over the game if they don't have another removal spell. They have Disfigure, so opponent's pressure is going well for them. Jade Light Ranger. Get rid of a couple elves, not particularly interested in those. Kind of have the ground clogged up here, but it's possible that I'm supposed to block here to force them to pump instead of being able to further advance their board. Opponent Thought Seizes, takes the Nylea's Disciple, their knights get pumped. So our only play this turn is a Ballista, which it's possible I should have used the Ballista to kill the Bloodsoaked Champion, but we're just under so much pressure here, and they're getting so much advantage from what they have going on. And just get another Ballista, hoping a chump block out of this turn, but the reality is we're just kind of dead. Opponent swings in here. We can block, but then we're just dead to the other two. So once again, this just kind of shows the absurdity of once this deck gets rolling. Smuggler's Copter is a very, very powerful card. And we almost had our best draw, well, one of our better draws, 1 into 3 into 4 into 5, but, you know, a Fatal Push, a Disfigure, and a Thoughtseize just kind of blew it all up. So it's possible as the Devotion deck we're supposed to take more of an aggressive role, not try to be defensive with Nylea's Disciple, because they can take a more controlling stance themselves with all of the Fatal Pushes and such, but Not quite sure what the correct, you know, direction is, but let's give it a go in one more match. We are on the draw for game number 1 and match number 3. This hand, just can't keep the 6 mana source hand, really. Payoff being Walking Ballista is fine, but actually we did keep it, which is interesting. It's possible this hand was supposed to be a mulligan. Elusive Mystic obviously kind of important to this hand. Opponent does not have a removal spell for it, which is nice. Choose not to make any plays here. It's possible I'm just supposed to play Voracious Hydra as a, what, 2-3? Just to keep the knight from attacking. But our opponent has a lot of pressure plus killing our dude. So let's continue to clear our board. Continues to pressure us with a lot. 6 damage a turn. Let's play out the Walking Ballista, killing the Night Market Lookout. Opponent with a Swift Rider. Let's continue to pressure us here. Has the Fatal Push after the looting. And then there's just nothing we can draw here. So, I think the takeaway from that game and some of the other ones is don't be afraid to mulligan a bit aggressively, especially with the London mulligan rule. You know, there are some good hands to be had. This hand was probably a mulligan, and that one hand with the double Once Upon a Time was probably a keep earlier on 7. So you really got to be good at evaluating the hands with the deck you're playing. I think the more we play this Devotion deck, the easier it is to kind of identify what hands are keepable and what hands are not. That hand certainly wasn't keepable. It was definitely reliant on the Mana Dork living. And then even despite drawing a couple Jade Light Rangers, that hand felt very, very air heavy. So definitely key to understanding some of these matchups is also understanding when you're on deck supposed to mulligan and when it's not. So anyways, on the sideboarding for game number 2. So the sideboarding for this time did a little bit differently. Once again, a couple Jade Light Rangers boarded out, a Voracious Hydra and a Walking Ballista. I'm still not 100% sure what you're supposed to board out in these matchups. I know the Nylea's Disciples really are the ones that should come in. We tried some matchups where the Planeswalkers got boarded out. We tried some where we boarded out a lot of the middling things with Burning Trees and such. I honestly think, you know, while the Planeswalkers can be hard to defend, especially Vivian, I think Nissa is very powerful. This hand, I think it's a mulligan. We don't have any early, don't have a 1-drop, don't have a Once Upon a Time. Walking Ballista is kind of a mediocre payoff without a ton of mana production. I think this hand's fine. Probably put back one of the, like a Voracious Hydra or something, because this hand has the ability to have a quick Nissa. So I think this is a keep with putting back, okay, I choose to put back a Forest, which I guess is fine. Tad bit risky. And I had no reason to cast this Once Upon a Time quite yet. Could have waited until turn 2. Oh yeah, I needed to find a 1-drop Dork. That's what I was trying to do. So that's why you cast Once Upon a Time on turn 1. Because the Mana Dork obviously gets this hand going a little bit faster. So we just get a Forest, they get a Bloodsoaked Champion. We draw another Forest, get the Burning Tree out. They do Looter Scooter. So I made one small mistake here. I choose to fight, because I'm in my mind that this is a 1 toughness creature. I should have just doubled the counters and made this a 2-3. Would have held down the board a lot better, and I think it just would have been better overall to keep the Voracious Hydra around for devotion aspects. So there's a mistake on my part there. Don't know in the end how much it would end up costing us here as they go for leaving Night Market Lookout, and they had the Fatal Push anyway. So trigger that, they start to get a little bit frisky. They get Bloodsoaked Champion. So we trigger Burning Tree into Nissa, start pressuring their life total back a little bit. They get to Smuggler's Copter is attacking us, so they seem to feel they can beat us in a longer game because they have Noxious Grasp, so Plynissa really doesn't matter. Our 1/3/3 isn't going to get there against even their lack of blockers. Once again, I could possibly attack with this Burning Tree, but I do want to leave another blocker back to keep these Blood-Soaked champions from attacking, but I think it might have been correct to pressure their light total and hope they can't kill our 3/3 here. They have Swift in anyway. Get to trigger things, get to attack. I choose not to trade off, which is probably incorrect, and then they're just kind of steamrolling us here. So, could have played a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a 3/3 Ballista, but we're still dead to having to answer the Smuggler's Copter. Plus, we would need to be able to block either the Mutavault or the Knight of the Ebon Legion. So, lots of things going on here. I think the big takeaway is overall, this is probably not a good matchup for Burning Tree Emissary.deck. The thing with the Devotion deck is it is a very mana-hungry deck. It is a very A plus B plus C. Gotta have the mana plus the ramp plus the payoffs. And a deck like Mono Black Aggro that has access to the two best disruption spells in the format in terms of early game with Fatal Push and Thoughtseize, has enough disruption to keep us from executing our game plan. Then when you're bringing in things like Disfigure and Noxious Grasp, further disrupting what we have going on, and they're able to bring in a slightly more controlling plan, so they're not just reliant completely on their aggro plan to kill us, but they can pressure us plus control the game. Just becomes very, very hard for Devotion to get off the ground in those situations. So, unfortunately, as much as I would like to say Devotion is, one of the top decks in the format still, as long as Mono Black Aggro is floating around, there is a fairly clear predator here. I mean, there might be some build of Devotion that could beat Mono Black Aggro on a consistent basis, but I don't think the stock Todd Anderson builds right now are good enough to consistently beat the Mono Black Aggro decks. So keep that in mind as you're making your deck choices in Pioneer here. If you like these versus videos, as we're continuing to build libraries for people to be able to see testing of fairly quick and efficiently how matchups play out a lot of times, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and let us know what you think of this video series, as we're trying to do something a little bit different here going into 2020, and we're creating a video library for hopefully every major deck and every major matchup in both Pioneer and Modern over time. So, this has been John for MTG Nexus. Hope everybody has a good day.